Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me. My name's Jamila, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about coaching. And the reason why I'm speaking to you about coaching today is because I considered coaching, and it was something that I wanted to try to navigate and learn a little bit more before I decided to take my next steps, really, because there's a lot of information out there about coaching. There are a lot of companies that are offering coaching training, and I was a little bit stumped as to where to go and to how to navigate it. And I thought perhaps other people are in a similar position as me, so I just really wanted to figure out by speaking to other people about their experience of coaches, whether that's people that are interested in coaching, whether people are qualified coaches or whether they haven't got qualifications in coaching. I just wanted to get a bit of background about their story and how they got into it, and really just any advice. So yeah, my first premiere interview was set up with the amazing Cynthia Pong, and she's based out in New York for a company called Embrace Change New York, or Embrace Change NYC. So I'll put all of her details um, in the link, and you'll be able to follow her. And yeah, check out our interview. And she gives some really helpful advice. And yeah, hope it's useful. So yeah, thank you.
Great. So I really fell into career coaching organically, like a lot of us do, I suppose. I'm actually a lawyer by trade, so I was a public defender, which in the US is, I forget if it's barrister, solicitor, but it's the one that goes to court. And it was my goal for the longest to do that job, which is I represented people who could not afford to hire their own lawyer to represent them when they're accused of crimes. So I did that for 6 years, but I really started burning out of that work about 3 years in, and it was a long journey to sort of grapple with, um, you know, I wrote a whole book about it. It's called Don't Stay in Your Lane. But it was a long journey to like sort of accept that I needed to reconsider how I was doing that work and what I was doing in my career period. So I had to step back. I took an unpaid sabbatical, did a lot of soul searching, decided to go into business for myself, and I started my business doing something completely different, actually. It was to do nonprofit consulting for social justice organizations and other progressive organizations. That did not work at all. It was like a crash and burn situation, could not get any paid clients doing that work. So I pivoted, and then I even pivoted again. And it was about the third or fourth try that I chose to try out career coaching because I missed working with clients one on one. And I knew I was always really good at problem solving. People would come to me for advice a lot. Um, and I wanted to work with people on deep positive change where they affirmatively wanted to do that for themselves, and be their strategic partner, essentially. So from there, everything sort of clicked, and I really enjoyed it. I found it was very gratifying. Clients sought me out and they got a lot out of it. So I knew it was a positive on both sides. And then I really niched down from there. Like I noticed that women of color were seeking me out the most, and I was enjoying working with women of color the most, which makes a lot of sense. And so I very unabashedly made that kind of my area of specialty from early on. And then it has just gotten more and more refined from there. So that's the story in a nutshell.
And then, so you talked a little bit about pivoting from one thing to
Yeah.
another. So, in terms of when you say you got back in, where you got into doing coaching, what was that kind of led you to that specific path in terms of, what steps did you take to kind of realize that this is the thing that you wanted to do?
Well, I didn't until I tried it. So the reason I decided to experiment with that, and I literally put out a message on my personal Facebook to be like, I'm considering taking on some individual coaching clients. Here's a sign up form. First session is free. Sign up if you're interested. I did like literally nothing more than that. It was very skeletal because I know that as an entrepreneur, you have to do that when you are
Mm.
trying things. You just have to perpetually be testing, refining, testing, tweaking.
Yeah.
If something's not working, stop doing it or change it, try something new. That's the fastest way to evolve your business and find something that works. The thing I had been doing right before that was mindfulness training. And I liked that better than the nonprofit consulting because one, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Two, I got people to like, I got more traction doing that. And so there was work and I knew there was demand. But I did not love working with large groups.
Mm.
So I really missed like the individual connection and being able to work with somebody over time on like deep change. Because I really felt like the mindfulness trainings were like, one and done. People weren't, institutional clients weren't really bringing me back. I wasn't doing any like long-term work with them. So then I went the other way. I was like, okay, how can I work with people one-on-one? And I don't want to represent them as a lawyer. So what are the other options?
Okay, cool. So what I'm really, really keen to find out is what did you do to kind of prepare yourself to, go into coaching and be confident and to be able to take on clients? What training or reading or,
Yeah, really nothing in the way of that. As I said, it was like, it's an experiment. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't, as an entrepreneur, I do not overinvest in things before I see if it is even viable.
Right.
So, I was like, I have 3 years legal training. I'm very good at critical thinking, analytical skills, problem solving. And I noticed a pattern looking back. I mean, this was from my own introspection of like what I'm good at and what people like, what data I got back, right? So people, when they seek me out, I realize I give good advice. They repeatedly seek me out for stuff. The stuff I tell them works out for them or whatever. So I was really looking at it from that perspective of reverse engineering something that I already had evidence from what I had done up to that point that I would be like a good hypothesis that I would be good at it. So at that point is when I put out the note that was like, here, I'm going to do this thing, sign up here. I think maybe right prior to that, I had also did like a 10-day like email challenge that was like a little bit of a bridge between the mindfulness work I was doing and the coaching. So it was like a 10-day gratitude challenge. And it was like each day I sent an email with like a prompt and something to think about. And it was very coachy in retrospect. Right. And so I did that. And at the end, there was like a winner that I raffled off. Like if somebody did all the exercises and tagged me on Instagram or whatever, that proving that they did it, then I did a raffle and that person got to name their price for a package of my coaching at the beginning. So there was something like that, which as you are noticing now, none of this is like, I didn't get additional training. I didn't get a certification. What I did was I took a hard look at what I already knew I was good at, figured out what that might translate into, found the evidence for that. And then I created like a little marketing thing through that 10-day gratitude challenge. And then I made a very skeletal, super streamlined, very basic sign up form, put the offer out there. I got 4 signups just right off the bat from that for the free first session, by the way. And then 2 of them ended up signing up for paid coaching for like, 8 sessions. One of them is still a client of mine. I've basically sort of become like her chief strategy officer in her business. And then I did another round where I was like, oh, this is going well, like sign up again. And then I got another 4 interested clients from that. I think again, like 2 signed up out of the 4. So it's a numbers game, Jamila, like this stuff, you have to be able to both do the mind game stuff and the numbers game stuff. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, what's the difference between someone who's able to do something successfully as their own self-employed business coach type deal.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting because I've spoken to a few people, and one of the things that's kind of come up and have been a bit apparent, has come up as being quite apparent, is that how do they, if they've gone through the coaching themselves and to secure those clients and be able to get those clients, what would you, from your experience, what would you advise people who have A, been through training, or B, haven't been through training? What advice would you offer?
Yeah, I mean, either way, I think you have to understand who it is you want to work with and be very specific about that. That's the niching piece, which earlier I was saying how I pretty aggressively niched down, within 3 months of testing it out. I was like, oh, I looked for patterns, in who was coming to me and who I liked working with the most. And I noticed it was women of color. So I was like, okay, let me just put it out there. I'm a feminist career coach for women of color. So that really helped because my messaging was very clear. And so it's like my therapist used to tell me, if you're not clear, Cynthia, they won't be clear. It's very true. Like if you're really clear with like who you are there to serve, what your mission is through your coaching, and it's specific, right? Like it can't be this generic fluff that you see a lot of times because, you know, when I started, there weren't that many career coaches. And it was only like 4 years ago. Now there are a lot. So you have to be able to slice through the noise and be heard. And the way to do that is to be super clear about who you are there to serve, like who your niche is. And then of course, like back it up with your expertise, like why are you best positioned to support them? What do you uniquely bring, your unique approach? Everybody has that. It's just a matter of confronting it for yourself and really distilling it down. And then you have to be in the places where your clients are, you know, and of course there's multiple ways to do that through your strategic marketing and stuff. But if you are not out there telling people you're there, they're never going to find you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
That's great advice. And so from the experience that you've had in the time that you've been coaching, what else would you sort of like add to that, apart from being really specific about who it is that you want to target? What other advice would you excuse me?
The marketing piece is huge. You know, you really do have to. A lot of people think in any old business that you can just hang up a shingle, you know, build it and they will come. It's not true. You know, you really cannot rely on that. Like maybe it's true 1% of the time or 0.5% of the time, but for most of us, that's simply not going to be the case. And going to your warm network, you know, friends and family, all that stuff is only going to get you so far. Because it's a numbers game, like I was saying before. So figuring out a legitimate marketing strategy that works for you is something that I think is important at the beginning. And it's a struggle for a lot of us because what I've seen, because I also, like, one subset of my clients is mid-career women of color who are entrepreneurial, who are starting their own small businesses, who are wanting to grow their small business. And I see this a lot in them through like my course Jumpstart Your Online Business and like working with them individually and stuff, is they don't want to do the business development part. Just really don't. They're like, I just want to do the work, the job, you know, the service, the product, whatever it is. And that's great. But until you have enough business revenue to hire, or like other funding to hire someone to do that piece for you, that sales and marketing piece, you have to do it yourself. You know, like I've posted on Instagram before too, like, you know, you have to be your own hype woman before you can expect other people to jump on that, because why would they? Like very few people would do that for you. So I'll leave it there and get your thoughts, but happy to clarify further if you need.
No, that's great information. And I think a lot of people really benefit from that, because I think the idea of sort of going into, like some of the people that I had spoken to, the idea of going into coaching and, you know, that side perhaps not necessarily that apparent always, to have that sort of really clear strategy. And like you just said about wanting to do the job but not really sort of like thinking of the infrastructure of how you're going to get that going. So, you know, I think that's really insightful. Yeah, and I think a lot of other people, are there any other areas for you that have kind of come up for you in the last, you know, like as you've been coaching, that you perhaps hadn't have considered previously? Because I know one other person mentioned the fact that it can be quite lonely, or you know, it's because you work, even though you are working with clients, like how do you kind of like keep your you know the negatives and sort of like transition those into positives to sort of make people aware of those things?
Yes. Okay. Well, there are always going to be things that anyone wouldn't like about what they have to do, right? There's no perfect job. I really don't think there is any perfect job, you know? So there's always going to be negatives. Like for me, for example, I'm a big introvert. So I frankly love working by myself, being my own boss. I mean, now I actually do have people I work with. So that's actually my growing edge, is learning how to work with a team, to like delegate well, to be a good internal leader to them, because it's easy for me. It's become natural to me now, because I've put a lot of time and effort into it, to become a leader in like a public sphere kind of way, like a thought leader and all that. But as far as leading as like a CEO of other people, it's like a totally different story, right? So that's kind of my growing edge now. But whatever the specific things are that you don't like about it, always, always, always go back to, what is your mission with this?
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to do? You know,
Yeah.
for me, it's, I want there to be like, I want every woman of color to get the money, power, and respect that we already deserve, and we have not gotten up till this point. So to me, that means pay parity and then some to make up for the past. It means equal, if not greater than equal representation at every single level of leadership within organizations of all kinds across industry and government.
Yeah.
So that's a big fucking mission, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't anticipate like achieving that by the time I die or retire, whichever comes first. But I think about that all the time and how important that is to me, and that makes me do the things I don't want to do, like apply for grants that I don't think I'm going to get, like apply for speaking gigs that I don't think I'm going to get, do the speaking engagements. You know, that for me is not my favorite part, but I do make sure, because I know that it's important for me to do a certain number of group events, workshops. Like we met through one of those, you know what I mean? My sweet spot, I'm very clear, is one-on-one like this, you know? But or working on stuff on my own. However, I know that like in order to really move the needle towards my mission, I have to get over that. I have to like get over myself, my own issues, and simply do those things I don't want to do.
That's brilliant advice. And I think it is that constant going back to the why, isn't it? That's like, what's your reasoning? What's propelling you? So that's really insightful and really useful, because I think we do lose sight of that, don't we?
I think it's easy to forget, and then get caught up in all the potential, like negative thought spirals, like I can't do this, like fixed mindset, fear of failure, imposter syndrome. I mean, the list goes on and on. Perfectionistic tendencies, self-sabotage, all that stuff. And also I want to be clear, like, you don't need a super big mission either. Like your mission can be, I want my business to grow to, 6 figures or multiple 6 figures, because I want to live X kind of life for me and my family, that's also fine. But whatever it is for you, just like know what it is and then keep reminding yourself.
Just always have that clarity, I suppose, that kind of keeps you moving forward. So
I mean, so I think initially you had asked me like, what are my thoughts on getting officially trained or like certified to do coaching versus not, right? So I do, like, I'm not certified and I'm not trained in coaching in any particular way. So I like, that was a choice that I made, partly because I started it as such an experimental thing, and I was like, I've tried so many things and it's not worked out great, so I'm reticent to try another thing and then have to invest several $1,000s into getting certification if I don't even know if I'll like it, if I'll be good at it, like, if people are going to respond to it. So it was partly because of that. And then once I started it, it was clear that the ball was kind of already rolling. And I will say there was one point at which like the client load was like kind of slowing, and I was like, I don't know, maybe I should get a certification. Like maybe that is the problem that I have. It wasn't, by the way, but at some point I was thinking about that, and I was like, all right, let me give it X more months. I can't remember what I said, probably like 6 more months. So like, let me see how I feel in 6 months time. And then if I still feel this way and it's still a problem, like clients are lagging, then I'll do a certification program. And, by the time I had put the reminder and it was 6 months, it was not a problem at all. So I was like, all right, let me just keep going. Yeah. So sometimes you have to do that, like put a little reverse deadline. But back to your actual question, I think there's fantastic coaches that are not certified, and there's a lot of terrible coaches who are certified. So it's not a one-to-one proxy if someone has a certification or not. And I tell this to my clients too, like if they're trying to do this, because I think a lot of women of color, especially Black women, especially some Latinx women, some Asian American women, we're like obsessed with like the degrees and the certifications and the letters after our name and like all those things. Sometimes a bit too much. you know?
Yeah.
And so I tell my clients, like, unless you are really trying to do something that's like become a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, you know, those things where you really by law in the US like have to have a license, then don't do it. Try it first in some kind of way, and then you can revisit like later on, do you still really think that you need it or want it? You know, so that's usually what I encourage people, because otherwise you're really just kicking the can on figuring out if this is viable. And frankly, I think like this may sound harsh, but it's kind of like people are a little bit afraid. They want to like stay in a safe place, which is like learning, you know. But you want to see when the rubber hits the road, is this thing gonna go? That's my perspective anyway.
That's really, really interesting as well, because I mean, I've had, like I say, I've had a few conversations with different people, and they sort of, I think the reasoning why they kind of turn around and say that the coaching, after they've qualified as coaches or they've gone through the training, one of the things that they say is that, oh, you know, I wouldn't have had the tools to have been able to deal or equip myself with some of the potential queries that I would get from clients. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of ways to learn, I guess. So I would say that no particular set of institutions or certification programs or whatnot, they don't have a monopoly on this knowledge and training, right? So I tend to be a person who's very like autodidactic, like I like to just learn on my own and find things out. So I would say that like it depends, I suppose, a bit on your like comfort level and how you prefer to learn and stuff. Because I don't want to necessarily dissuade people who are like really into that. I would just say, make sure you have a real honest conversation with yourself and that you are doing it for the right reasons. And that you vet the program, you talk to people who did it, and you talk to people who maybe did it and like didn't feel like it was a good value or something too, you know, because sometimes we only talk to people who liked it, so you're getting a skewed perspective. So like do your due diligence before you decide, and make sure you're not deciding because you're like actually afraid to try something out. And the other thing is like I don't pretend to my clients that like I have all the answers, you know. Sure, I know a lot of stuff, but like it doesn't mean I always have the answer. I think it's more like knowing how to ask the right questions, or like being able to think about something and reflect things back, like pay attention to what's coming at you and sort of like rearrange things for the client. That's like my style of coaching, I guess. And you know, sure, like some of these things I learned because I'm a trained lawyer, but a lot of them also I think it's just from all of my education together, like critical thinking skills. And then also a lot of my coaching now is based on like my own sort of lived experience. That is a common thing if you are someone who got into this because like you want to be the person that wasn't there for you in your past. Like that's a very common story, right? So if that's the case, you lived through that part of your past already and you learn things. And so I think that's where like the knowledge comes from. I'm not saying people should just like go out here and like do whatever willy-nilly. I mean, I still have a very strong coaching code, and like I'm very strict about a lot of things in terms of my coaching and just my policies and like things I don't pretend to clients I know about, you know. So there's that. And then this is very rambly, but I'll say one more thing, which is, you know, have your community of support and stuff. So in the beginning, I had another friend who had been doing life coaching for a while. So like she showed me a lot of things. I've got tons of colleagues now who do this stuff. So we always talk about like, you know, what's something that's good to invest in our own coaching, make sure we're like continually improving. You know, we share notes like that about best practices. And so that's really
that's good. So you've got like a collective, a community that you can sort of like lean on. And so that would be quite a good thing to kind of overcome that idea of sort of being isolated
Yes.
as the coach.
Yes. And from a business side, it's good for cross referrals and collaborations.
Ah, very clever. Very good. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting. And I think some of the things that we covered have been really, really sort of helpful for others as well. So yeah, that was been.
I hope so.